Witi Underwater was made by Te Pūrongo Productions for Te Reo Irirangi o Aotearoa, with support from Te Māngai Pāho.
Mānawa mai e te rangi irunga nei. Mānawa mai e te papairaro nei. Mānawa mai ngā mākuru ki runga ki e nei taurā, ki runga ki e nei tauira. E te wāhi ngaro, uhia mai tō koutou korowai aroha, tō koutou korowai manaaki, kia tau iho ko ngā tō mai rangi atawhai ki runga ki a mātou. Hei ārahi, hei tohu i a mātou, ki te tika, ki te pono, ki te rangi Māori e. Kia tūturu e rangi, kia tūturu e papa, kia whakamau ai kia tīnā.
Tīnā,
Haumi e, hui e, taiki e.
In Māoridom, we farewell our people to a place called Hawaiki Nui, Hawaiki Roa, Hawaiki Pāmāmao. There waiting for us will be all of our tupuna, all of those who have died, our aunties, our uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers, all the way back to the beginning of time. When I arrive there, I don't want to talk to them in English. They mightn't even let me in. When I die, I want to make sure that when my ancestors say to me, kia ora, no mai hara mai, I won't say to them, I'm sorry, but I can't speak te reo. Ko takitimu te waka, ko ōkahu atu te maunga, ko te waipāua te awa. Ko waituhi taku kāinga, ko rongopai te marae, ko wī pere te tangata, ko Witi Ihimaera a hau, he tauira o takiura a hau. I better say that again. Ko takitimu te waka.
We'll get back to the pepeha of Witi Ihimaera, of Witi Ihimaera. And sure, usually you just edit out a tiny stumble like that in a podcast interview. But that moment, right at the beginning of our first studio sit-down with Witi Ihimaera, near the start of the year when Aotearoa's most famous Māori author was reciting his whakapapa for us, his waka and his mountain, his river and his marae, his name and his lineage, when Witi misspoke a kupu, a word, and asked for a retake, it seemed so perfect. It could have been scripted. Because, of course, there was a stumble. There's a reason why, in 2024, Witi Ihimaera decided to go back to school for a year and to put so much effort into learning the language of his tupuna, his ancestors. A language that many people had assumed he was already fluent in.
Ka pai tihei. Ka pai tēnā koe Rodney. Hea tēnā matuatahi.
Actually, there are many reasons Witi made this decision. This has been a haerenga, a journey that's been 8 decades in the making. And we'll get to some of those reasons in this podcast. But for now...
Ka pai. Pai aru mai te whana kawe wariwari ne, me kōrero tia te kiwaha.
For now, it's enough to know that early last year, in a classroom in Oaraka, Mount Albert, in Tāmaki Makaurau, Auckland, Witi Ihimaera, at the age of 80, is one of the 30 eager new tauira in a full-time, year-long class being led by kaiako Charmaine Hansey. This course is called Rumake Reo. Reo, that's language or voice, as in te reo. And Rumaki means immersion. So Rumake Reo is an immersion language course. The idea is that the kaiako, the teacher, and her tauira, the students, are meant to be using Māori anake, Māori only, even if they're an absolute beginner. But Rumaki is also the Māori word for drown or drowning. And sometimes when you're deep into your haerenga reo, your language journey, and you're not meant to be relying on the English language to keep afloat, drowning is exactly what it feels like.
Korau mau mahara te kai patu o te rā waki o te pāpauri nō reira tēnei te
Koinei te
whakaaro
maramataka Māori e te whānau, ka pai koinei ngā tohu.
E te hapa ira, ira. Ira, ira.
Ringa ringa pakia, wai wai takahia e kino
He Māori ahau, e noho Māori ana, ki tōku ao Māori.
I'm Adam Dudding, and Witi Underwater is a 5-part RNZ podcast about what happens when a literary legend is thrown in the deep end. Wāhanga Tuatahi, Episode 1, Ko Wai O. It was late 2023 when my podcasting co-producer Eugene Bingham said he'd heard, via the daughter of a friend, something like that the author Witi Ihimaera had enrolled for the famous, some would say infamous, Rumake Reo full immersion Māori course at Te Wānanga Takiura o Ngā Kura Kaupapa Māori. Eugene's Pākehā and Ngā Puhi, I'm Pākehā, and we've both been taking classes in Te Reo Māori for the past few years. We'll get into some of the reasons for that in a later episode, but basically I started out with an online course and then shifted into a class with a group of workmates, including Eugene, and we've both stuck with it, including some time at Kuropo at Unitec, and right now we're both in Te Opikitanga, Level 6 at Te Wānanga o Aotearoa. All of that study has given us an appreciation of the challenges tauira face, the vocab, the whakamā, the mamai, and for some, the generational scars. He tino ua tēnei mahi. It's really hard going. But it's also kind of thrilling the way, bit by bit, if you stick with it, ngā kupu, ngā reira mahi, ngā kiwaha, ngā whakatauki, the words, the sentences, the idioms, the proverbs, they slowly start to give up their meaning. So anyone who's made the commitment to do a course in Te Reo Māori has my admiration. But even more so, if they do it hardcore, in a full-time, full-immersion, year-long course like Takiura's Rumake Reo. But the idea that Witi Ihimaera would be one of the people who wanted to take that leap? Witi Ihimaera, Aotearoa's pioneering Māori novelist, author of Pounamu, the stone-cold classic collection of short stories about the lives of rural Māori, which came out in 1972 and has never been out of print since. The guy who wrote The Whale Rider? Witi Ihimaera, who, by the way, has just turned 80? I have so many questions. Eugene and I have both been journalists for decades, and the podcasts we've made in the past 7 or 8 years have sometimes been pretty heavy. Stories about murders and miscarriages of justice, an investigation into a cult, a bit of politics. But this new chapter in Witi Ihimaera's Haerenga Reo, it felt like a story that really needed telling. Also, I happen to know Witi a little because he and my father worked together back in the day, and we'll get into that in the next episode. So a few days before Christmas 2023, I give Witi a bell and ask if he'd mind terribly if Eugene and I followed him around for a year with some microphones, occasionally asking impertinent questions. And he said, yeah, sure, let's talk in the new year. When we catch up, it's mid-January, just weeks out from the start of the course. I want to check that Witi is okay with the idea. And yep, the answer's still yes. In fact, since we last talked, his brain has been sparking and fizzing with ideas for how we might want to tell his story. He likes the working title, Witi Underwater, and its connection to that word rumaki and the double meaning of immersion, but also drowning. And he starts riffing with more watery metaphors about how he and the other waterlogged students in his class, o no hoa akomanga, will be putting together words, kupu, to make a raft with a sail which they can then climb aboard and sail to the horizon. He reads to me from some notes he's already jotted down about why he's excited to get deeper into Te Reo Māori. One big motivation is that he wants to write a novel set in Hawaii, the ancestral home to which everyone returns after death. And unlike his previous works, which have generally contained just words or phrases or small sections in te reo Māori, he'd like this one to be fully in Māori. And he tells me that same thing you heard at the very top of this episode.
When I arrive there, I don't want to talk to them in English.
When he dies and gets to Hawaii himself, he wants to be able to talk the language of everyone he meets there. He's also been thinking about some of the kupu he already knows, like humarie. One of its meanings translates as handsome or beautiful. Witi says that to his ears, humarie is a wolf whistle of a word. And what about the word pukumahi, which in English means something like industrious or hard-working? Look at the etymology of that word, Witi says. Puku, that's stomach. Mahi, that's work. So pukumahi, it's stomach work. Isn't that just a brilliant way of thinking about it? There's going to be so much to talk about, says Witi. We can ask him questions like, why the hell are you doing this at the age of 80? Or we can ask him about some of the other language journeys he's already made while navigating his long and interesting life, learning the language of gayness, learning the language of the international diplomat. Witi's haerenga, his journey into the depths of the Rumaki course, hasn't even started yet. But I have the feeling that in this prolific writer's brain, the words we'll need are already half-written and ready to fall from his mouth. Ka taka ngā kupu I tōna waha. We'll just need to be ready to catch them. But along the way, we're also going to learn a lot of other things, such as, what is it like to share your akomanga with a tangata roa nui, a celebrity?
Oh, ko ia te mea ka mahi te rail rider. So, ai, koe rā Papa Witi.
And we're also going to hear about the sheer hard work, te whakapau kaha, of being in that class.
Just the number of kupuhau, 30, 40 or 50 different words every week.
And we'll discover how a new language can open the door to new ways of seeing.
Okay, what is it in this person that makes me think of the flight of a bird or the growth of a tree or the movement of te moana?
But also, we're bearing witness to the revitalisation of an Indigenous language.
Well, thousands upon thousands from around the Motu arrived in Wellington yesterday.
At a time when some of the big gains for Māori and for te reo Māori are looking less secure than we thought. A time when battles that looked settled decades ago are flaring up once more.
Tuia I runga, tuia I raro, tuia I roto, tuia I waho. He manu taupua koea e tuku nei I te reo kia rere. He manu taki koea e whakamene nei I te aitanga tāne. Tuia, huia, whiti ora e. Kei ngā kai kōkiri, nā koutou I ora ai te reo Māori, I ngā māngai o ngā kai kōrero. Kei ngā kai whakatutu, me kore te maru āpō I rangi whāwhā I te rere o te reo Māori ki ngā tōpito katoa o te motu. Koutou ngā tani whahiku roa I takahia te ara o whakapito ngoi, tēnā koutou. He te mārai kura tuakana nepe. Me kore koutou ko huhua hoa whawhai, I tū ai o tātou kura kaupapa Māori, puta noa I te motu. A, me kore ake koe I tū ai he kāinga, e āhuru nei I tō tātou reo. Arā, ko te wānanga takiura o ngā kura kaupapa Māori. E moe e kui, me te mōhio, ko o tini hōmaitanga, ka ora I roto I o tini uri, I o tini waihotanga, me ngā whakatipuranga e pihipihi tonu mai ana. Kei ngā iho o ngā maunga kōrero, huri noa, nau mai, hono mai. Anei tātou ngā kai pupuri I te mauri o te reo Māori, kua hui tahi nei ki tēnei whare kōrero. He kōna I purangi tēnei, hei whakaawe I ona kai whakarongo. Kia hie koe ngā tahi tātou I te ara, I takahia rā e Papa Witi, nōna e tamariki ana, tai atu ki a mohoa nei.
That was a mihi addressed to the kaumātua kuia who advocated for kura kaupapa Māori and the establishment of takiura. We'll be hearing a different mihi in every episode of Witi Underwater, all of them written and performed by Te ao Mihia Tūmai. who is the mātanga reo for this podcast. On a warm Tuesday morning, February the 5th, 2024, the academic year at Te Wānanga Takiura o Ngā Kura Kaupapa Māori is about to begin. And I'm not there. Somewhat inconveniently, I have a prior engagement, writing some news articles about the Waitangi Day commemorations in Pewhairangi Bay Islands. But though I don't quite realise it at the time, what's happening on the Waitangi Treaty grounds that same day is going to become part of the Takiura story too. Because ever since the New Zealand election in late 2023, hei raruraru ki te haere, there's been trouble brewing about the way Aotearoa talks about Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and its English version, the Treaty of Waitangi. Anyway, on that belting hot February day, while co-producer Eugene was in Tāmaki Makaurau, watching Takiura's new tauira Ihimaera meet and greet, I was watching the government's coalition leaders, David Seymour from ACT, Winston Peters from New Zealand First, and Christopher Luxon from National, receiving a very different kind of welcome on the Waitangi Treaty grounds. Ngā wero, ceremonial challenges to visitors, can get pretty intense even when the hokainga and the manuhiri, the hosts and the visitors, are getting along just fine, when everything is kete pai. But I have never seen a wero quite as ferocious as the roaring that greets Seymour, Peters and Luxon on the treaty grounds. The frustration and anger that come into focus during that remarkable wero is a tohu, a sign that this will be no ordinary year. Meanwhile, at Takiura, as I mentioned, Eugene is there as Witi and his fellow tauira set off on their own extraordinary year.
The pōhere is huge. There are many tauira students, plus all the kaiako teachers and other staff. I get there early, standing around in the car park, having conversations with tauira hou new students. Our conversations are mostly in reo Pākehā, with a smattering of te reo Māori. By the end of the year, their faces will be familiar. Kua rere te reo Māori. When Witi arrives, he's dressed smartly in a cream-coloured jacket, and he's carrying a small case that has his lunch in it. Many tauira have whānau, or colleagues with them. There are police and customs officers in uniform here to tautoko, support their hoa mahi, workmates. But Witi has come alone. All the same, many people know him or know of him and come up to greet him. I go to stand beside him. Then all of us visitors, te rōpū manuhiri, are called together. Who will volunteer to speak for the manuhiri at the pōhere? Everyone looks at their shoes. Then eventually, a couple of tāne step forward. Akuia ushers Witi towards the front. He beckons for me to come with him. The murmur of the crowd fades. We're ready. Kua rite. The kai karanga cries out, and we all step towards the large gymnasium where the pōhere is being held. Many feet, but it's like an awa, with all the tributaries and creeks coming together, surging towards the sea as one. Inside, Witi and I lose track of each other, but soon I see him being ushered towards the paipai, the front row of seats where the kai kōrero and other important guests sit. He seems at ease, but I wonder if he's nervous, hoping he won't be elbowed forward to stand and speak. The room is packed. Haka and waiata bounce around the walls, merging into harmonies within harmonies.
kupu tuatahi. Kaua kōrero tuhia. Kupu tuarua.
A few weeks later, on a Wednesday morning, we sit in on Witi Ihimaera's Rumaki class.
Kupu tuatoro.
So you possibly had to be there to really follow what's happening here. But at the front of the class, the kaiako, Charmaine Hansey, is basically playing charades. Ke te mahi whakari. She's acting out various nouns, verbs and adjectives as her class, na tauira, write down the kupu for checking later.
Kupu tuawha.
And we've got a microphone close enough to Witi that you can almost hear his brain whirring as he searches for the words. Also, when he laughs at Fire Shah's charades.
Kupu tuawhitu.
All year, the class will be on a vocabulary crash course. For now, they're still on the basics. Today, it was mostly household items. And now it's time to swap papers with your neighbour to check each other's work. The Rumaki classroom is, well, just like any school classroom, really. There are about 30 tauira in this akomanga, which has given itself the name Te Iti Pounamu, a reference to a famous whakatauki or proverb. They're seated in 5 clusters of desks, and there's a whiteboard covered in tuituinga writing, mostly kupu Māori. Up the front is Charmaine, usually referred to respectfully as Fire Shah, basically Auntie Shah. And we're sitting with Witi right at the back of the class, the time-honoured choice of the naughty kid.
Anei, te tiro mai kia papa. Anei, whakatu mano, whakatu anei te mahi mahi.
Mahi mahi, ai.
Ai, whakatu atu mahi anō. Ko te mea tuarua, āhua te kaumarima miniti noiho ki te tākaro kēmu. Ena nahi, he rawe, I rongo te hari, te koa, te katakata, he oe, I rongo hoki a hau te reo Pākehā. Ka pai. Nō reira koenei te wero anō I tēnei rā, I a koutou e whakaarohia ngā kēmu, ka pai, ngā momo kēmu, kei a koutou, āta whakamārama, āta tohu, I roto I te reo Māori. Ka pai.
So that was Fire Shah explaining the rules of some group games, kēmu āropu, using picture cards, ngā kāri pikitia. And you might have made out that she was saying that during yesterday's kēmu āropu, she heard lots of joy and laughter, te hari, te koa, te pukukata, but she also heard quite a bit of te reo Pākehā. And this is rumaki, right? Immersion. So she then went on to say, te wero mō tēnei rā, today's challenge, is to do these kēmu with the kāri pikitia, sticking with Māori only. Reo Māori anake. First though, the akomanga has rima miniti, 5 minutes, to get familiar with the cards.
Nō reira, ka hoa tu āhua, rima miniti ki te ako ngā kupu te tūtahi, kawe haere ki te tōtika ki te kēmu, ka pa ako ngā kupu, hono kia tika, a kātai ka tākaro kēmu.
Any questions?
Te pātai.
So you've probably already figured this out, but this podcast is going to have quite a bit of te reo Māori. But just like the early weeks of Rumaki, where some of the tauira start with not much more than kia ora, tēnā koe, ko Adam tōku ingoa in their kete, in their toolkit, we know that there'll be some people who want to listen to this podcast who also don't have much reo yet. And that's all good. Kete pai. If that's you, no mai. Welcome. So for our part, as we script and edit this, Eugene and I will try to make sure that even when the water's getting deep, we'll throw you a lifeline, give you enough catch-ups or advance explanations in te reo Pākehā that, just like the tauira at Takura, you should be able to keep afloat. Look, by the final episode, we're going to assume you no longer need a translation for certain words like kaiako, tauira, akomanga, kupu, whakaaro. But seeing this as episode 1, wāhanga tuatahi, we're happy to remind you that kaiako means teacher, tauira means student, akomanga means class, te tahi kupu is a word, and te tahi whakaro is a thought. Anyway, back to the akomanga with our kaiako whaia Charmaine and our tauira, including te kaituhi rongonui, the famous writer Witi Ihimaera. Or, in this akomanga, simply Papa Witi.
Papa Witi, te kau.
Pauaka makariri.
Ka pai, pauaka makariri. E hara te pauako makariri. Ka pai fleur, te kaumatahi.
If the wordplay that made Papa Witi laugh went slightly over your head, Witi was giving his answer for kupu takau, word number 10, which was pauaka makariri, meaning box, cold box, refrigerator. But as Whaia said, you don't want to confuse pauaka with pauako, because pauako makariri would mean cold teacher. And that's definitely not Whaia. There's a real warmth and a buoyancy about the way Shah runs her class. There's lots of kata-kata, laughter, but there's also no mistaking who's running the show. Te wānanga takiura o ngā kura kaupapa Māori o Aotearoa has been around for almost a quarter of a century. It offers a 3-year teacher training degree course, which this year has around 40 students, and then there's Rumaki, the course Witi is taking. Witi is one of 145 tauira across the 5 akomanga Rumaki reo, plus there's always a long waiting list. Rumaki reo is a big commitment. It runs from Mane ki te Paraire, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. for the full academic year, Pepuere ki te Noema. Learning in a Rumaki environment can be intense, but Whaia says the course starts gently.
February is very structured, so very structured, real mama, lots of fun and games, everybody's happy. We say around here, our kōrero, that's the honeymoon. And you can do the whakawhanaungatanga because you have time. We're getting to know each other.
Whaia says this whakawhanaungatanga, getting to know each other, is super important. And it happens at a time when there's still 2 languages, reo rua, allowed in class.
Reo rua tonu, ka pai, reo rua. It's a good thing at the beginning of the year to get to know the students because they can express in English. And then it's also to get them to write down or to share, if they want to share, why are they here? Because when it gets real tough, they need to go back to what's your why, what will keep you going through the tough times.
Soon enough, though, that safety net of te reo Pākehā is pulled away.
You know when your class is ready.
But alongside that central challenge, the wero of learning purely in the language you're learning, beyond that, hei maunga teite anō hei piki. There's another big mountain to climb in this class. Well, 7 mountains, actually.
The stress in the lead up to the whakapuaki.
He ua mana ki te whakarite mo ia whakapuaki.
Oh my God, whakapuaki week.
Whakapuaki. In English, the word basically means verbal presentation or speech. But for the tauira of Rumaki, whakapuaki means hard work, and more than a little heartache. 7 times throughout the year, every tauira is required to stand up and deliver their whakapuaki i te reo Māori anake, in Māori only. And there are strict rules. So, no reading your whakapuaki off notes.
Kaue pānui, ka pai, kaue pānui.
You've got to stay on topic.
E hāngai puana ki te kaupapa o te wā.
But, ko te mea nui, the big thing about whakapuaki is that as you progress through the year, ka roa ake ngā whakapuaki. They get longer and longer.
There's 7 whakapuaki, so the first one is 8 minutes.
The second whakapuaki, te kau meneti, 10 minutes. Then te kau mārima, 15. Rua te kau, 20. Toru te kau, 30. Whā te kau meneti, 40 minutes. Katahi ka, and then...
Ko te mea whakamutinga, ko te ono te kau meneti, ko tahi haora.
That's ko tahi haora, 1 hour, speaking Māori anake, without notes. So this final whakapuaki is an epic feat of maumaharatanga, memory, mātauranga, knowledge, huinga kupu, vocabulary, and kounga, fluency, which is why tauira find the prospect so scary. The first whakapuaki of the year arrives about 9 weeks in. We'd hoped to get along to Shah's akomanga to record Witi's Wero Tuatahi o Te Tau, his first big challenge of the year, but the logistics got tricky. Heoi, get the bike. Because very soon after that, we caught up with Witi at his home in Tāmaki Makaurau.
Kia ora!
His house was easy to find. It was the one with the wind vane on the roof in the shape of a whale.
Hey, hello. What a lot of beautiful things you have.
Well, I've been here long enough.
Yeah. No, it's gorgeous. All the stuff on the walls.
Hey!
Amazing. Kia ora.
His house is ātāhua, full of taonga, treasures, and mahi toi, art. And there's something very soothing playing on the stereo. Witi is a big classical fan. In fact, he's written a few operas. Witi has only just walked in the door himself from his day in class at Takiura. This was the second to last day of term 1.
Take a chair.
I've brought scones and jam.
Did you make them?
I made them. What? Well, it's cheaper for a start. But also...
Taking Kai to an interview just makes sense. When people get hungry, they get hangry. But it also conforms to really basic ideas of tikanga Māori. If you turn up at someone's house, you want to acknowledge their manaakitanga, their hospitality, with a koha of your own, right? Mā tō raurau, mā tōku raurau, ka ora te iwi. And Witi supplies the drinks.
Sure.
Eugene pours.
He miraka mo?
Hi.
And now, fed and watered, Witi's ready to talk Takiura. There's a famous pūrako, a legend about Tāwhaki, the ancestral deity who climbed to the heavens and brought 3 kete, baskets, of knowledge from the gods back to humans. Te kete tuauri, te kete tuatea, and te kete aronui. To get up there, Tāwhaki climbed the Potama o Te Rangi, a sort of stairway to heaven. And if you've ever been on a marae, you've probably seen that potama represented in the tukutuku panels on the walls. It's that strong, square-edged zigzag, like a staircase viewed from the side. It's a pattern that symbolises all the steps someone takes towards mātauranga, knowledge and enlightenment. For Witi, ascending the educational potama wasn't always simple. So he's not exactly bursting with confidence about the year.
I suppose I should make a confession and say that any language that I've learnt, I've always had a C or a D. So I'm actually expecting to get a C or a D for this one.
Witi's not kidding about the C's and D's. Sometimes he didn't even do that well. In his childhood memoir, Māori Boy, and its sequel, Native Son, he writes about how much he enjoys school as a young boy, especially English. And these days, if you look back at his CV, the book awards, his time as a professor at Waipapa Taumatarau Auckland University, the writing scholarships that took him to France and the US and elsewhere. When you look at his honorary doctorate from Te Herenga Waka Victoria University, his French Order of Arts and Letters, his Prime Minister's Award, his DCNZM and his QSM for services to literature, look at all that and you'd assume here's someone pretty comfortable in the world of education and academia. But in those memoirs, Witi also writes, very movingly, about the times he crashed and burned academically. At school, he just scraped through many of his exams. His first run at tertiary education, a bachelor's degree at Auckland University, was a wipeout. He failed courses repeatedly, including first-year papers in Māori, and started to spend his time in bars rather than lectures. Eventually, his father drove from Gisborne, tracked Witi down to a dingy hotel in Queen Street, poured him into the car and drove him back to Gisborne, where Witi could lick his wounds and figure out what to do next. Later, he completed a degree at Victoria University in Wellington, and at the same time his fame and mana as an author was growing, and eventually all those other tohu mātauranga academic accolades arrived. But yeah, Witi Ihimaera hasn't always been a starry student. This first term he's just completed has covered a lot of the basics. Ko ahau tēnei, who I am, tōku tinana, my body, ōku tairongo, ōku kare āroto, my senses, my feelings, tōku toi ora, my well-being, tōku whānau, my family, and
tōku marae. We go through various words and concepts, like what a wharenui is. We'll discuss what a teko teko is, what a kōruru is, where the po mata aho is. We'll discuss what the maihi mean in terms of its symbology. We'll discuss pare kawakawa, whakawai, kōrupe, matapihi, maho, and so I led the discussion on maho yesterday.
I'm not going to translate all of those, but the teko teko, that's the carved figurehead on the gable of the wharenui. Parekawakawa is a wreath worn at tangihanga, funerals. Whakawai is part of a doorframe, and so on. Like we said, there's fresh kupu to learn every day, and often that vocab is interwoven with knowledge about te ao Māori, Māori things and concepts and beliefs. But here's the curious thing. Witi is actually already unbelievably knowledgeable about te ao Māori, about the history and genealogies of whakapapa, the legends and knowledge contained within pūrākau, and clearly all those kupu and whakaro relating to the marae.
So remind me, maho. What's
maho? Maho is the veranda or the porch of a wharenui. And so I reminded people that all of our tikanga and all of our kawa is actually from Hawaii. And so the concept of the maho was one that Māori people in Raiatea and in what is known now as Hawaii, it was the place where the priests and the ariki would welcome in the dawn every morning, and also the place from which they would speak.
Yeah, so of course Witi led a discussion of maho yesterday in the akomanga. But there's a paradox here. He finds it infinitely easier to share that information about te ao Māori in te reo Pākehā.
One of the hard things is the assumption that because I am this age and because I've done what I've done in terms of writing about Māori, that I know a lot, and in fact I don't. Most of my work has been in English. Ka rea hau ki te kōrero Māori, ka rea hau ki te tuitui a Māori.
Kōrero means speak, tuitui means write. Witi is saying that he can't really do either in te reo Māori.
So my practice has been driven by Pākehā academic and scholastic practices. So I think that surprised the class that I don't know anything. Because I was brought up at a time when Māori wasn't spoken at school, wasn't spoken widely as it is now. I do say that when you put me in a Pākehā setting where I speak English, I am second to none. But when it comes to being able to speak on the marae according to Māori concepts and according to Māori precepts, I am a tauira.
Remember Tāwhaki and how he ascended the staircase of the Pautama to collect ngā kete e toru o te mātauranga? When Witi was coming up,
I always say that I was climbing the wrong Pautama to success.
So going back to school now at the age of 80 is one of the ways that Witi Ihimaera is trying to choose the right Pautama this time. But one term in, it's already tough going. There's all those new kupu.
Being this age, my memory is not as good as it used to be.
And even once the words are in place, it's about summoning them fast enough.
I'm really still at that stage where kaore aho kuarere ki te kōrero I roto o tōku reo hau. So I'm not at that stage where I can speak with my new language. I'm saying these words, they're flying out here and I'm saying, come back, hoki mai kia hau, come back to me. What I wasn't prepared for going to Takiura was that we would have to put into practice by standing to speak what we were learning.
He copes much better if there's an opportunity to write rather than speak.
Because writing gives me time. My brain at the moment can keep on thinking at a slower speed.
But there's a problem here. Remember those whakapuaki? 7 assessments, ka roa ake? They're not about writing. They're about standing up and talking without notes.
Oh my God, whakapuaki week. Everybody was going around saying, 8 minutes, how are we going to get to 8 minutes? Because for most of us, this was the first time that we would actually expose ourselves, get all of our e's and aw's in the wrong place, all our okus and akus and tokus and takus, because Māori language is such a sophisticated language that it's not as if you can say something and that's it. It has at least 3 or 4 or 5 different ways of saying the same thing.
So what happened in those 8 minutes? What was Witi's first whakapuaki about?
Ea ha te kaupapa.
Ea ha te kaupapa. Te kaupapa o te whakapuaki i ko wai tēnei, ko wai ahau.
Ko wai tēnei, ko wai ahau. Who is this? Who am I? Then Witi explains how he went about preparing his first whakapuaki. And it turns out that when Witi Ihimaera is given a task, he'll generally go his own way and make it his own.
In this particular one, ko wai ahau, we're given a kind of prescription and we're given these words. You know, we can say whether or not we're ha nea nea, we can say whether or not we're harikoa.
Ha nea nea means pleasant. Harikoa means happy.
We can say whether or not we're pōri.
Sad.
Mahana.
Warm.
Which comes unnaturally to me because I've never spoken about myself in that way. I've never been that direct.
So he took a different approach.
I come from Mahaki, the iwi, and so I am Mahaki as a person. I come from Te Whānau Ākai, the iwi. Whānau Ākai hei whanapana maro, te iwi, hei whanapana maro ko au. I was talking about myself, but talking through the various concepts of identity that I was comfortable with.
So the ko wai o whakapuaki could have been a simple account of Witi's whakapapa and his traits, but he's expanded it into a philosophical interrogation of the nature of identity.
I said something like, ko tōku papa ko Tom, he kai ahu whenua, me tangata kuchi kuchi hippie, kua riro ahau tana puku mahi.
He's talking about his father Tom, who was a kai ahu whenua, a farmer, and a tangata kuchi kuchi hippie, a sheep shearer, and who was very pukumahi, hardworking, stomach work.
So instead of saying that I am pukumahi, I was saying, well, you know, my father was a very, very industrious person. And so that's why I am industrious.
Witi is keen for us to have a better sense of how the whakapuaki goes without the hesitations of memory. So he repeats part of it later on in the RNZ studio. In this longer extract from his whakapuaki, he goes on to talk about how he and his father Tom shared the same forehead, te rai, and jawline, te kauwai, 2 parts of the body that are also metaphorically significant in terms of leadership and knowledge and kōrero, speaking.
Ko tōku pāpā ko Tom e kai ahu whenua me tangata kuchi kuchi hippie. Kua riro au tana puku mahi. Haora, kaunga me kohara mo te oranga. Ka kite koe ki a Tom, ka kite koe ki au. Ko tōku pāpā he māngai o Waituhi. Tōku rai e tana rai nui me mōhio. Ko tōku kauai kāre i te kaha o Tom ki te kōrero Māori kei runga te marae, engari ka kaha tōku kauai ki te reo Pākehā. Ka tū atua hau ki roto a rātou reo Māori, a rātou marae, I rite ahau ki a rātou.
And sure, seeing this wasn't in the classroom, Witi was totally bending the rules just then about reading your whakapuaki off paper. But this is Witi, the writer. And as he reminded us, between scones and cups of tea in Herne Bay, he's got his reasons for sticking close to the written word, even though this course is all about standing and speaking.
I've said that at the end of this I want to write a novel. And I will write a novel, whether or not I get kicked in the teeth by the language. And so I think at the end of all of this, it will either kill me or else I will really succeed in creating this new novel. But to do it, I will probably be involved in a lot of transgression.
E haere ake nei, Coming up in the next episode of Witi Underwater, the akomanga learn just how hard umaki reo can get.
Kei te tino hia kai, he kōwhao e roto I te ngākau.
Sometimes I just need to go home and close all the curtains.
A school trip with a difference. And Witi recalls past victories.
I actually got on a plane and went down to him. I banged on the door.
And the fights you can never win.
Never mind. Congratulations. Anyway, boy.
Ko Adam Darringahau, ko Maua, ko Eugene Bingham, ngā kaituhi me ngā kai whakaputa o tēnei kōnai ipurangi. Ko James Danzi te kai tito, ko Au te kai huahua oro, ko Andrew McDowell te kai pūkaha oro. Ko Te Omihia Tumai te mātanga reo, ko Pai Tāwhiti te kai karakia. Ko Iana te Nahu Owen te kai kōmihana Māori ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, ka nui te mihi ki te maungai pāho. A, ko o mātu mihi nunui ki ngā rangatira, ki ngā kaiako, ki ngā tauira, o te wānanga takiura o ngā kura kaupapa Māori o Aotearoa. Wai hoki ki a Papa Witi Ihimaera.
Unuhia, unuhia. Unuhia te tapu o tēnei wānanga. Unuhia te tapu o ēnei kōrero. Unuhia te tapu o tua whakarere. Kia wātea, kia māma. Te tīnana, te wairua, te ngā kau, te whatumanawa. Kia puta ai ki te taha tika. Kia puta ai ki te taha wātea. Kia puta ai ki te whaiao, ki te ao mārama. Tau mai te mauri.
Haumi e.
Hui e.
Tai ki e.
Ko te reo, te take.